By the time I turned 42, I found myself wrapped in a cocoon I had woven over the years. The loss of my husband Victor 3 years ago had torn a piece of my life away. Our house in Cambridge still bore traces of Victor, but the silence had become more palpable than ever, even though my academic career kept me busy. It all began one morning with a call from my sister Margot. "Helena, I need to ask you something," Margot said, her voice carrying an unusual weariness. "Daniel is going through a difficult time. Could he stay with you for a while, just until he gets back on his feet?" Daniel, my nephew, the lively boy I hadn't seen in ages, now 25-year-old. The last time I saw him he was struggling with the awkwardness of adolescence. According to Margot, he had been through a breakup and had lost a bit of his faith in life. I couldn't refuse her request. "Of course, Margot," I said. "I was expecting Daniel. This will always be home for him." I got ready early that morning to pick Daniel up from the airport. I chose a black dress and comfortable shoes. I couldn't help laughing at myself. After all, I was only picking up my nephew, but still I wanted to look my best as I was going to be going home for the first time in my life. I wanted to look my best as I was going to be going home for the first time in my life. I felt my heart race as I waited at the terminal, and then I saw him, tall, broad-shouldered and walking with a quiet confidence. He was wearing a simple white shirt and dark trousers. The sleeves of his shirt were rolled up to his elbows, accentuating his strong arms. "Helena," he said with a warm smile. His eyes had a certain sparkle in them. As he hugged me, I felt the strength and warmth of his arms. "Daniel, it's so good to see you," I said, smiling back at him. After the hug there was a brief moment of awkward silence as I looked at him and he smiled back at me, and I felt his eyes light up as he hugged me. There was a brief moment of awkward silence between us. Daniel's eyes seemed to linger on me as if he were studying me. Something stirred inside me, a mixture of excitement and confusion. "You must be hungry," I said quickly. "Come on, let's grab something to eat before we go home." I took Daniel to a small Italian restaurant in the heart of Cambridge. We talked throughout the meal, trying to bridge the distance that time had created between us. Daniel talked about his life and the challenges he had faced. His voice carried both the vulnerability of a young man and the strength of a man. His voice carried both the vulnerability of a young man and a sense of determination, but in the midst of the conversation I noticed something. Daniel's gaze often lingered on me. Whenever our eyes met, he would quickly look away, only to look back at me moments later. There was something in his gaze that unsettled me, yet piqued my curiosity. "Cambridge is still as beautiful as ever," he said, glancing around. "But you, Helena, you look even younger than me. It's as if time hasn't touched you." The unexpected compliment made my cheeks warm. "Thank you," I said with a small laugh. The unexpected compliment made my cheeks warm. "Thank you," I said with a small laugh. "But I think you're exaggerating." Daniel smiled faintly, his eyes never leaving mine for a second. That flutter inside me reappeared, but I couldn't make sense of what I was feeling. It was just a warmth, like something from the past, like the rush of early youth when we returned home after dinner. The evening chill had settled in. As I unlocked the door, I noticed Daniel looking at me. "It's a nice house," he said, "but I guess it's a bit quiet." "It's been like that since Victor," I replied. Daniel said nothing, just nodded as he continued to watch me. Once inside, Daniel retreated to his room. I stayed in the living room, trying to pass the time in front of the television, but my mind wouldn't settle. Daniel's looks, his words, even his mere presence disturbed me in a way I couldn't quite explain. It felt like something I'd been repressing for years had been awakened, something unfamiliar and unsettling. After a while I couldn't fall asleep. The restlessness inside me had grown so much that I felt I had to do something. Think something. Slowly, I got up and made my way to the kitchen, hoping to escape my thoughts for a while. A cigarette and some coffee might help. As I turned on the coffee maker, the stillness of the dark night outside the window pressed down on me even harder. It was a night that felt like it was missing something, a place of feeling, a piece of me. At that moment Daniel appeared silently beside me, wearing a tank top and loose shorts. His muscular frame was accentuated in the soft glow of the night. Even in his casual attire there was something about him that inexplicably caught my attention. My eyes instinctively wandered to his physique and my mind spiraled into confusion. A voice inside me whispered shyly yet insistently, "Am I going to spend the night with him?" But another thought immediately stifled it. What was I thinking? He's my nephew. Is something wrong? Daniel asked, his hands in his pockets, his tone carrying a light-hearted edge. "I just needed some time to clear my head," I said, my voice shaking slightly. I sipped my coffee and stayed in the kitchen. Daniel stayed with me. We exchanged a few more words, but the silence eventually grew heavier. It was as if we were talking to each other for the first time. It was as if we needed to talk, but neither of us wanted to. Suddenly Dan came closer, so close that I could feel his breath even more. A warmth spread through my body and my heart began to beat, but I still couldn't understand what I was feeling, except fear. There was something in Daniel's gaze, a depth, an awareness. His eyes held a tenacity, a silent waiting. For a moment we stood frozen, saying nothing. His presence, so magnetic, disarmed me completely, but with great effort I forced myself to say, "Daniel, you should get some rest. We have to get up early in the morning." Without saying another word I turned to leave my room, but as I walked away my eyes couldn't help but drift to his back. This night with him just one step ahead of me made me wonder how I was going to make it to the morning. I wanted to make it through the night, to somehow forget the emotional turmoil inside me. By the time it was 2:30 a.m. I finally managed to close my eyes and drifted off, but unfortunately it wasn't a peaceful sleep. When I woke up it was 3:30. And my eyes caught something in the darkness. As I tried to shake off my sleeve I noticed a silhouette stealthily approaching my room. My heart started racing. In the dim light I could clearly see the shadow moving. It was Daniel. He was in my bedroom. For a moment I felt frozen, unable to move. At the same time the confusion and excitement inside me grew. "What are you doing, Daniel?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. I couldn't quite understand what I was feeling, but even though I wanted to resist him, it was getting harder and harder to push this moment away. Daniel didn't react. Instead he got up from the armchair and sat down on the edge of my bed. As he moved closer, his eyes locked with mine even more intensely. There was something in his gaze, a pull, an invitation. He slowly leaned towards me. He said, "I've never felt like this before," and then everything happened at once. His lips were so close to mine, almost as if they were made to complete me. Without thinking I closed my eyes and kissed him. I could feel both the attraction and the fear running through me, but I couldn't resist. When Daniel's lips met mine it felt like a spark ignited throughout my body. Everything unfolded so quickly, as if in a dream. So fast, like a dream I didn't want to wake up from. As I slowly pulled away I was breathless. My emotions must have been written all over my face. But Daniel was still there, close, warm and strong. And with every passing second I felt myself losing more and more control. That night, what had happened had happened. By the first light of the morning I felt as if I had woken up in a completely different world. When I opened my eyes in bed I was greeted by Daniel. When I opened my eyes in bed I was greeted by Daniel's absence. Suddenly everything hit me like a wave of reality. At that moment my body still carried the warmth of him, but my mind was clouded with colliding thoughts. What had happened? Why had it happened? I slowly got out of bed and prepared to take a shower. As the water cascaded down my back, the reflection in the shower glass felt strange, as if it wasn't even me in there. I felt a sense of chaos, a sense of guilt. I felt like I had woken up in another world. I felt like I had woken up in another world. I felt like I had woken up in another world. The more I replayed that night and everything that followed, the more wrong it all seemed. Yet the feelings were so intense they still echoed in my body and mind. As the water flowed over me my thoughts raced, trying to understand what Daniel wanted from me, or what I really felt for him. Was this a mistake, or were we really feeling something? Was we just living in the moment, not knowing what would come next? Maybe I was just too caught up in it all. After my shower I left the bathroom. My room still felt strange, heavy with an unspoken tension. Daniel was gone. I was left alone, standing in the emptiness. In that moment, looking back, I wondered if this was my escape, escaping loneliness, facing my fears and desires. But now, with everything over, only the silence remained. I took a deep breath. I told myself I might never think about that night or those feelings again, but one thing was for sure: the feelings and experiences of that night were too deep to forget. Would I come to understand what was right and what was wrong? I didn't know.